Hi, today I want to talk a little bit about processing a landscape type photograph in Lightroom. And you can see here I'm using Lightroom 4. The same basics apply for Lightroom 3, although there were definitely some changes in the develop module, and specifically these tools here are considerably different from what the Lightroom 3 tools are, and I can show you what those look like by changing the process from, oops, not that one, the process from 2012 current to 2010. This is going to make the develop module look and behave like Lightroom 3. So if you want to see what, well, basically you can see how these things look different. One of the biggest things, I mean, obviously these are not the exact same sliders that you get in Lightroom 4's current process, but one of the biggest things they did is here you can see with the exposure slider you can go plus or minus, and the default is 0. And when they changed it to the Lightroom 4, what they did is, again, these are completely different algorithms, and they made all of these sliders so you can go plus or minus, not just the exposure. And that's actually a pretty significant and useful edit. So when I look at an image like this, there's obviously going to be a very high dynamic range because we have a bright sunny day, especially we've got all of the snow, and that really makes a challenging situation for most cameras, and certainly for DSLRs. Once you start getting the medium format, then they have a little bit better dynamic range, and you may find that things are a little bit easier. One of the things that you can see, a little bit of flame here. This is actually the sculpture is actually an eternal flame sculpture, and so we're going to want to maintain that detail. We're definitely going to want to make the clouds and the sky look a little better. Just deeper, richer, get some nice definition between the clouds and the blue of the sky. We're going to want to raise the levels pretty much of all of this area here, all of the brick for sure, and the sculpture as well, while not blowing the details here in the snow. So it's really this is a good challenge for an edit because there's a lot to consider, and there's a lot of work to do. First of all, what we're going to do is kind of a global adjustment here, and we're going to bring up the exposure a little bit. And so I like somewhere in here. I think that what you can see here is that we're not actually clipping any highlights here, and if we were, then you would see a red overlay, so that's a good thing. That maybe a little bit right here, pretty minor though. But what you see is that the blacks are pretty far over from the left of the histogram. So what we're going to do is we're going to move the black point to the left, and you can see by doing that we've made the bricks a nice rich color here. And is this hugely different from where we started? No, not really. I mean, we'll go back here. In terms of the bricks, a little bit brighter, but I think that this is, and obviously I've not seen this building myself, I didn't take this picture, but I think that we're in a pretty good shape here, and we might even bring the blacks over just a little bit more. Now when you zoom in, you can see the blue line here, this red line here. This is chromatic aberration, and this is a pretty common thing, especially if you're going wide angle. And let's see what we got here. We're at 23 millimeters for the focal length. This is a wide angle lens, and even if you have the most expensive lenses out there, you're still going to get some chromatic aberration from time to time. The places that you see it are contrasting areas from really relatively dark to bright. And here especially, you can see it in the trees here, this red fringing. This is classic. You see it when you have branches against the sky. And those are the kind of places where you're going to want to look. So one of the things they did in Lightroom 4, and they've had the chromatic aberration tool for at least a couple of generations. I don't remember when they first introduced it, but with Lightroom 4 they made it so it's virtually automatic. Click that box, and did you see how magically this all went away? probably 8 times out of 10, that's all you need to do. And it's just such a cool and powerful technique. And we're turning on and off. Look at this red fringing here, and you can see how not only does the fringe go away, everything kind of jumps just a little bit sharper, and so that's an important thing. If we needed to adjust it a little bit, of course we could move these sliders, but that's really beyond the scope of what I want to talk about today. So what have we done so far? We've adjusted the overall exposure here. We've made it a little bit brighter. We've made the blacks a little richer. And you can see we still have some good detail here in the flames, but we're going to work on that a little bit more. It's kind of interesting. You can see what the heat has done. You know, you get those little wavy lines of the heat, and it's really changed the way that you perceive this building, where you don't get it over here. So that's just kind of a fun little detail. The next, what we're going to do is a little bit of a white balance adjustment. So here we are, we're starting off a shot, and this is a bright sunny day, but really this is mostly in the shade. You don't see any shadows really, and so my guess is that it was shot as a daylight, but I think a shade is going to give us a little bit warmer and a little closer to where we want to be. Is it a little bit yellow? Maybe, but then you can always fine tune it. And so we bring this down just a little bit, and I think we're in pretty good shape. So let's again jump from the beginning to where we are here, and already I'm liking the way this is starting to shape up. Now we changed the contrast a little bit when we changed the exposure and the black points. I think we're going to tweak the contrast just a little more, and we're going to use the contrast slider for that. And what you can see is we're starting to get a little bit of little bit of clipped highlights over here. Nothing too significant. Again, anytime you see the red overlay when you have this activated, then you gotta take a look and see. And okay, it's nothing too major there. We have a little bit of a bright sky issue, but the next thing we're going to work on is the sky anyways. So first of all, maybe give it just a bump of clarity a little bit. It's going to see how all these bricks kind of just jump into focus. We'll just go there to there. You can see here in the sculpture as well. And we're going to give it just a hint of a vibrance. Now the vibrance is going to adjust saturation only where Lightroom has determined that it needs it. And the way that it determines that is by looking to see which colors are most brightly saturated to begin with and adjusting all of the other ones. So now we've made all of our global corrections. We're going to come down to the HSL palette, and of course that stands for hue, saturation, and luminance. Now to make your sky look beautiful, the trick is start off with the luminance selected, activate the palette by clicking on the little circle, and you can see now we've got the little triangles on top and bottom. Move your mouse over to a part of the image that you want to adjust and click and drag down, and you can see all of a sudden we have much better detail in the clouds in the sky. The next trick is go over to the saturation tab and go just the opposite direction. Move up just a little bit, and you can start to see, click here and there. You can start to see the sky is really starting to come out and give us some nice detail. I'm thinking we want to go just a little bit more of a bump here. And while we're here, the other thing that I want to do is now I think we're getting a little dark in some of these brick tones, and maybe we're going to bring that up just a little bit. Same thing, click with this on, click and drag up, and you can easily adjust the luminance, which is really the brightness of the image. So again, I want to start here and show you the before and after where we're at. And you can see it's a pretty big change, and even though I've been kind of talking and going not very fast about this edit, everything that I've done so far would typically take me maybe 2 or 3 minutes. And that's really the power of Lightroom. So you can see we still have a little bit of some clipping here, but again, if you turn this off, you can click on it and zoom in. You can see that it's really not a big issue. What we're losing is a little bit of sky detail here, but that's not really someplace when you have just the white clouds behind you that you expect to see a lot of detail anyways. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to work on these clouds just a little bit. They are bright. We brought back some detail, but I think that if we do some negative exposure values for pretty much all of the sky, then we're going to start to get even better sky detail. And sky detail is always a good thing to have in an image. Now, by default, the flow and the density are about 100, and that's too much. That's going to give you an on or off effect, especially if you're just using a mouse. And that brings up a great point. Is I really recommend that you use a Wacom tablet so that you can use a pen to do these kind of edits, because it gives you a much more control over your editing. Not only do you have a pen, which is a very intuitive way for most people to work, but you also have a pressure sensitive device, and so the harder you push, the more effect you get. And that's just a pretty cool thing. So anyways, here we are. You can see we're starting off with a -3 exposure value. I always recommend that you start off more than what you think, because it gives you an easy way to see what you're doing. And then once we do our basic drawing in, then we're going to go back and we're going to refine this. So I'm going to start off a little bit bigger here and just kind of paint in. And you can see how we're getting some really nice detail here. And you can see how the the painting is maybe not very even, and that's okay. You don't want it to be perfect. You want to have a little bit of variation in there, and that's kind of part of the effect that you're getting. Now, of course, you want to have your lines fairly neat. You don't want this to be showing darkness or lightness when you have a transition, but you want to have a decent sort of effect. So we're just going to do it real quick. And okay, so then I said we're going to modify this after the fact. I actually like the way, pretty close to where we are with the sky. I think that's a really pretty sky tone. But really, we still need to bring it back a little bit, because what happens is if you don't, then what you're going to find some of this uneven painting looking a little bit obvious. And so if we dial it back just a little bit, find the right area, and it's going to be different for every image. Here I'm going to stay with about 2, but it could be anything. Next, I said I wanted to work on this flame a little bit. The flame is going to be kind of important, since this is a eternal flame kind of sculpture. So again, we're going to activate this palette here. Here we're going to darken the flame just by dragging it down a little bit. And you can also move the sliders, so we're going to bump the sliders just a little bit, the orange and the red a little bit, and maybe the yellow just a little bit. Now, of course, the important thing is that once you do this, you back out and see what you just did, because obviously there's going to be a lot of red in here. We're going to have some orangey yellows in here, and so we're going to jump back just a little bit and see. And I think that for me, and of course, I've not seen this building, and obviously this is kind of my vision and maybe not your vision, but you can see how these changes, pretty subtle. You get a little bit of change here and here, but you can see the flame a little better, and I think that that's a good thing for this particular photograph. So I'm going to leave it at that. At this point, what I would do is I'd bring it over to Photoshop, and I thought I saw when I was editing up here, yeah, there's a little bit of noise. You can use the noise reduction tools down here. Now, the problem with the noise reduction tools is that you lose detail when you increase the noise reduction, and so you have to find a nice balance. And let's see, what do we do to this image? I think it probably looks okay on a macro level here, so I'm not going to worry too much about it. But you definitely want to make sure that you get everything looking just so. It almost looks like it was snowing on that day. This is an unusual sort of effect here in the sky. That's really not the common thing to see in terms of noise, and so this is a bit of a surprise to me. But playing with these tools here is going to help you to remove these kind of or this kind of noise rather. You can see changing the color a little bit, the detail. All of these tools kind of work. Oh, you can see that I bumped away too soon. Gotta give the computer some time to catch up sometimes. So you can see how it's changed as I move the setting around a little bit. And hopefully you can see that in the lower resolution here. So that's how to approach this image. And again, you know, bump out and then look to see how the overall image has changed based on what you did here. It's always a good idea to go back and verify that you've not introduced something that you don't like, that may or may not be, you know, worse than the original problem. So I'm going to leave it at that. That's where I do my editing. If at this point I noticed there were other minor details, like maybe I wanted to clone out little spots like this, more often than not I would go into Photoshop to do that. So let me know if you have any questions, and happy editing.